Hey, today we're going to make white rolls. These are refrigerated rolls. These are not typical of make, let rise, punch down, let rise again. These you're going to make ahead of time. So if you want them for, say, Easter morning, you're going to make them a night before, or you're going to make them 3 or 4 nights before, because the trick is they rise inside the refrigerator, which is odd. This recipe comes from a woman that I knew when I was about 22. She was my Sunday school teacher, and she got the recipe when she first got married. So when we took the years back, we dated this recipe to about 1930. And I think you're really going to like it because it's really versatile, and you can make this recipe up. This actual recipe I'm going to give you will make like 3 dozen rolls. So on the YouTube channel, I'm going to have the recipe, but I might also have like half of that because that'd be more manageable. But if you were to make the whole recipe and come out with 36 rolls, the cool thing is you can keep that risen dough in your refrigerator, and you can pinch off what you want. Say when you get home from work, if you just want 5 or 6 rolls for your family, pinch it off, knead them, put them out, let them rise for about 1.5 to 2 hours, and then you have manageable forms of fresh bread every night. That's why this is really cool. So I think you're going to like it. First of all, we're going to get our base ready, which is a mixture of oil, and that is 2/3 of a cup of cooking oil, 3/4 of a cup of granulated sugar, 4 teaspoons of salt, and 2 cups of whole milk. Okay. So, moving this stuff out of the way so you can see me at the stove top. What you're going to do is you're going to try to incorporate all of this liquid and the sugar together to let it dissolve. You're going to set your oven on about, not your oven, but your stove top on about medium high. And you're going to set with this milk. What the goal is you want to dissolve all the sugar and the salt. Okay, you want to incorporate that together. You're going to scald the milk. That's the way the recipe is written, and that's kind of scary because, you don't want to burn milk. So scald was a word they used to get to just bubbling up. Now, there's an easier way to find out whether or not your milk is ready. It would be using a thermometer like this. Get to lukewarm about 105 degrees. But if you don't have a thermometer, and I didn't for many years, I didn't work with one, you just sit and stir. When it just starts to gradually bubble up, turn the heat off of an electric stove. Okay? Move it away. With an electric stove, even though you turn a burner off, it still has heat. It can still be cooking, so you always want to remove it. A gas stove, if you turn it off, it's gone. So you can sit here and leave it on top of the stove with a gas burner, but not with an electric. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to wait until our milk is just bubbling up, and then we're going to take it off, and we're going to let it cool down just a little bit while we get the rest of the ingredients prepared. This is going to be a 3-step process. That's why when people requested this roll recipe, I kind of grinned because this video is going to take a little longer than the rest of them. Okay, so our milk mixture that we had just boiled on the stove, and remember you just boiled it slightly, nothing big. If you do get it too hot, take it off the stove, set it inside your freezer. Move things around, set it inside your freezer, leave it there for about 15 minutes, and that will cool it back down. The reason you don't want boiling hot milk and oil and sugar and stuff is we're fixing to incorporate this with eggs. And if your liquid is too hot, it will actually scramble your eggs. Okay, so you don't want that. So you want to cool it back down to below 105 degrees. So again, if you have a thermometer, you can check, but also you can kind of just touch and tell that it's coming back down to lukewarm. Now this is going to take a bit of an explanation. Right now, while we're in lockdown, there is a huge run on yeast. So you really can't go to the store and buy yeast right now the way you could before, which would be like 3 little packages would be like $1. And this happens to be rapid rise instant yeast. This recipe actually calls for just dry yeast, dry active yeast. I didn't have any of that, and I can't go buy it at the store, but I do have this instant yeast. If you are going to incorporate instant yeast into a recipe that called for active dry yeast, you're going to tweak it a little bit. The bacteria is stronger and more alive in the instant yeast. And what that means is when you use the active dry yeast, you would typically pour it into your bowl. This recipe calls for 2 packets, so that's yeast. So if that was active yeast and not instant, you would take lukewarm water, you would add it to your yeast, you would add about 2 teaspoons of sugar. It really doesn't matter, yeast eats the sugar. And what's going to happen is, if it was active yeast, you're going to let the yeast proof itself. And what that means is you're going to set a bowl, in a cereal bowl like this. You would put the active dry yeast into the bowl, add the warm water, add the sugar, and what's going to happen in about 10 minutes, it would be bubbly and almost coming out of the bowl. But that was going to prove to you that your yeast is good, right? So today we don't have active yeast, so we're going to use instant yeast. I did the same thing, but it's not necessary because instant yeast is already ready to go. It's stronger. If you are going to substitute instant over dry, you want to use a little bit less instant. Okay? You really can't mess this up. It's not going to make a big difference. But if you are, maybe take it down about a quarter. My yeast was actually out of date by March the 12th. So I didn't cut mine down at all because I didn't know if it was actually still good. So what we do is in our bowl, our mixing bowl, pour that yeast mixture. Remember, if you're working with active yeast, it's going to be real bubbly and frothy. Don't think that you did something wrong. That's what you want with active yeast. With instant yeast, no worries. 2 scrambled eggs, or not scrambled, but beat eggs. And I don't always say everything right, but I don't want to start completely over, and I figure you're smart and you can figure it out. Okay, this is your milk, egg, oil, salt mixture. If you did happen to scald it too much, just don't scrape the bottom. If it smells burnt, don't use it, but if you just happen to get a little bit of a film on the bottom, you're fine. No worries. Now, the recipe calls for 9 to 11 cups of flour. So what I do is I start with 5 in one and 4 in the other. The reason I do this is so that I don't lose count of what I'm doing, and I can have a halfway point. Okay? For many years, when I would make this recipe, I did not have a stand mixer. And you can do this without a stand mixer. It just takes you a little bit longer and it's a little bit more elbow grease, but you can do it. This is a dough hook. If you have a stand mixer, put the dough hook on. Take your 5 cups of flour. This is 5, this is 4. And pour it into your liquid. Okay, just like that. Now, this kind of gets messy. That's why I always have an apron. I ruin way too many clothes if I don't cook with an apron. Okay, if the camera can see that, it's really wet. But it's going to start, the flour is going to start absorbing that liquid. And that's why you want to split this up. Every time you make it, you may use a little more flour, a little less flour than you did before. I can't really give you a reason why that happens, but that's why the recipe called for splitting it, because it's been doing that for 100 years. Okay, so see, it's real gloppy, kind of looks like oatmeal right now. Oh, it smells good. As soon as yeast starts to combine with the flour, it just smells wonderful. Okay. We're going to start to incorporate the other set of flour. So there's 1 cup, and mix. Are you able to see this on the video? I need to bring it closer. Okay. Now, for all the years that I worked without a stand mixer, I would just continue to incorporate 1 cup of flour or a half a cup of flour at a time until my dough started to get to a soft, elastic ball. And you're going to see what I mean when we add some more flour. And we're going to put it on the mixer. We're going to start to incorporate that. You see you probably can't see down into the mixer, but I will show you as it starts to incorporate the flour and you're getting to the end of of adding the flour. You want to see the dough pull away from the side of your bowl. You want it to be twisted around your dough hook in a way that kind of looks like cotton candy. Okay, it's going to draw to the center. The more it draws to the center and pulls away from the bowl, the more you know you're getting ready to turn it off. Okay, right now I'll show you real quick. See, it's still it's wet. Add another cup of flour. Okay, so you see it's now coming up out of our bowl. And I'm going to add a little bit more flour. And there's no sense in being neat with this because you're going to have a little bit of a mess. It's just such a big recipe for this size container. And don't worry, messes can be cleaned up. But do you see how that's looking a little bit like a cotton candy machine? And it's pulled so much away from the sides, and I'm going to go ahead and stop it. I'm working backwards, so just bear with me. My controls are backwards. And it is fun. Let me tell you, when it gets all the way up here and you have to clean it later, yeah, it's a blast. I guess you can hear my dog in the background. Okay, on your surface of your countertop, it's up to you how you want to mix it. I usually put a piece of wax paper on the top of my granite. You can do it straight on your granite. If it's clean, it won't hurt anything. You'll just have a little bit more cleanup when it's over. Turn out your bread. This. And see, it pretty much, when it's ready from the dough hook, it pretty much pulls everything off the sides. I mean, the cleanup it's not as tacky. You'll know when you're cooking it or when you're making it. When you see it change like that, you'll know that it's time to start doing the rest of the kneading with your hands. So, take your flour and put it on top. Okay. And this is where it gets fun, because I never realized how much bakers had to have really good arm strength. When I would do this without a mixer, I would knead for 10 minutes straight to get the dough the right consistency. I don't have to do it that long now. Probably about 4 or 5 minutes after I get it out of the mixer, I will sit here and play with it. And I'll tell you why you're going to play with it so much. It's really interesting with dough. with bread dough especially, you need to work with it a lot. The more you work with it, the more elastic it gets, the more moldable it gets. Okay, so there's other type of pastries and baking goods, like say a pie crust, where you want to work with it as little as possible, because it's going to make it tough if you work it too much. Bread is not that way. Bread, you have to love it to make it, because you have to spend quite a bit of time on it. Now, as you can watch, I'm adding the remainder of my flour. That's why I said sometimes it takes less, sometimes it takes more. If your dough feels dry, add a little tiny bit of warm water, a couple of tablespoons at a time, to get it back to the right consistency. If it feels wet, add a little more flour. You really cannot mess bread up. There's a funny story that I just realized probably a few years ago, that when I was a little girl, my grandma would take me outside to play a lot. And I'm talking about I was about 4 or 5. And we'd go outside and we would play cooking. And she would say, okay, here's our leaves, let's crack those up, those are our eggs. And we'll pour the sand in, that's our sugar. And here's a little bit of water, let's stir that in. The water would be our milk. Things like that. And after all those years of just thinking that was playtime, I started to realize that she was actually teaching me to cook a custard right there in the dirt. She had already told me about the eggs, the milk, the sugar, the flour. And as we were playing, and as I was little, I was learning without even realizing it. She'd play Play-Doh with me, and she'd say, all right, let's roll out the rolls. And she'd say, now always bend them out, turn them under, tack the ends back under. So you're watching me do it like that. The top is breaking and it's pulling down. The reason you want that to happen is you want the bread to be able to expand as it rises. So when she was showing me with Play-Doh, she was actually teaching me how to make bread. And I never even realized. We had an ingredient for everything. When she wanted us to cook green beans, she'd take sticks, break them up. That was our green beans. I miss her a lot, but she stays with me a lot, because with every time I cook, I remember something about her, and something occurs to me like that I never really realized. So my point in telling you that is, when you're playing with your kids, you can teach them a lot without even realizing, or without them even realizing, that they're learning something that will be with them the rest of their life. See, if you can see, I'm not sure if the camera can get it, but you can see the little breaks in the dough. And that's what you want. You want to break it, fold it under. Break it and fold it under. Can you smell it, Caleb?
Mm-hmm.
And the more tacky it gets, when it feels like it's sticking to your fingers too much, add a little bit more flour. And you can punch it, you can turn it like I was doing, or you can keep it on the bottom and turn it to the top. It's up to you. And as you're getting to the end of the kneading, it's going to feel really stiff. It's going to feel like a medicine ball. And like I said, this makes a lot of bread. But there's some cool things you can do with it. Like I said, you leave it in the refrigerator and you can cook on it all week. You can actually roll them out, let them rise, and cook them half of the time. Take them out of the oven, cover them, and freeze them. Take them back out later and cook them for the other half of the time. So this recipe is so versatile. My whole point in teaching people lately how to cook, and how to cook really cheap, and passing on those things that I learned when I was young from my grandmother and my grandfather, who had been born in the Depression. These things, you take it for granted that you're always going to be able to run down to the store and buy rolls. And that's not always the case. Rolls or bread or things like that. So, oh, it looks so pretty. So as I'm teaching you how to make these rolls, I'm hoping that you also realize that you have it within yourself to make a whole lot of things that often look scary, but when you break them down into small pieces, they're really not. Like rolls are nothing. You just have to have a lot of time to be with them. Now, we had talked about tomorrow, because these are going to sit overnight for 8 hours in your refrigerator covered. So you're not going to roll these out till tomorrow. And at that point, we're going to have half rolls and half fruit kolaches. So I think you're gonna like seeing that. All right. Okay, we've worked our dough for about 5 minutes. Now you're going to take the biggest bowl you have in the kitchen, and you're going to add a little bit of vegetable oil, shortening, butter, doesn't matter. You can spray it with Pam, but what you want to do is make sure the whole bowl is oiled. I mean every bit, because this is going to rise out of the bowl like a mushroom. Alright, so we work the dough. See how pretty it is? Okay. What you want to do is pick it up on your wax paper. This is a clean piece of wax paper. It's not the one I have on the dough. Put it in your bowl with the pretty side down. Okay, so the folded side is up right now. What you're going to do is, now that you did that, you're going to flip it back over to where it's the pretty side. And what that did is that just gave a little bit of oil to the top of your bread, because as it expands, it's going to hit the top of your wax paper, and you're not going to want it to stick, right? Cover it like that. Move it into your refrigerator and leave it. Don't mess with it for at least 8 hours. If you're going to do this in the morning and cook them in the evening, you need to start really early, like 6 in the morning. I'm never going to do that. So we've made the rolls today. I'll see you back here tomorrow. We'll roll them out. We'll make dinner rolls and we'll make kolaches. Okay, so yesterday we made our homemade refrigerated dough. Put it in the refrigerator, left it overnight, and you saw how small it was. Well, this is how big it gets, so be sure you have plenty of room on your refrigerator shelf for it to expand. All right, you don't have to punch it down, but it's fun to see it go down, and you have to be able to pinch it off anyway. So, in case you're wondering, yesterday I used bread flour, and this works perfect for any breads that you're baking, but also all-purpose flour will work just as well. So, what we're going to do is you're going to start pinching some of the dough off. See, it's real elasticy. That's what you want, like that. And you can tell on the top it's kind of got a crust from being in the refrigerator. Just incorporate that toward the middle, just like we talked about yesterday when we were talking about Play-Doh. You're going to push the tops out, bring it to the bottom, seal the bottom, push it out, bring it to the bottom, and seal the bottom. And you're going to just keep doing that and kneading that dough for each individual roll. It doesn't take as long as it seems, but we're not going to video me rolling out all 36 to 42 of these rolls. What we've decided to do with ours is make half rolls, half kolaches. So I'm going to roll a few out to show you how, and then we're going to come back later when it's time to bake and time to fill the kolaches. So this is about the size of a roll you want. When this rises, it's going to be about double, okay? And I'm really not exaggerating here. This is a little bit tough to pull up. Okay, this is a little bit bigger than what I want. The best way to get uniform rolls is to weigh them about 2 ounces each. I'm not going to weigh all of mine. We're going to just fudge it. They smell fantastic while they're cooking. You're going to like that. I wish they'd come out with an oil or a Scentsy that smelled like bread. So that's number 2. Put them far enough apart that they can rise. If they touch, it's not going to make a difference. You'll just have an edge on your roll, but that's no problem. They still eat the same.
Is that all you want to do? Why?
Oh. My camera guy's talking to me back there.
I am.
Now I'm going to do a couple more, just so you get the idea. And it's really fun. Just roll it in your palms. If your hands start to get too sticky, you can add a little flour, but I've never had that happen before. It's when it's nice and cold, it works really good. And since it comes right out of the refrigerator, it is nice and cold. So say I only wanted to do 12 of these. I would pinch off 12, roll them out. I would stick this, the way it looks, back in the refrigerator, and it can keep for a week. You can pinch off as much as you want each night and have fresh rolls. You do have to let them rise again for an hour and a half to 2 hours, but it's a neat way of having bread every night. Okay, so you get the idea. We'll come back when it's time to bake. Okay, so we've got our rolls all rolled out and they're ready to rise. You can do one of 2 things. You can take plastic wrap, pull it out, spray the back of the plastic wrap with some Pam. This is just olive oil. Or you can spray directly on top of the rolls, which is what I do. Just give them a light, quick coat. Because as they rise and they're nice and fluffy, your plastic is going to stick to it just a little bit. And when you pull it off, it kind of pulls the dough. I just don't like to do that. I don't like too much chemicals. So I put a little oil on them first so that later the plastic will let go easier. Now that's what you're going to do. You're going to leave these to rise for an hour and a half to 2 hours. Depending on how cool your house is will depend on how long you need to let them rise. So I've never had to go over 2 hours for sure. They're going to be a little bigger than this, and you might think, oh, that's not big enough. But once you put them in the oven, they're going to expand to double the size. You're going to have a lot of bread when this is over. Okay, we'll be back in a little bit after they've rose. Okay, our rows are ready. 2 hours, give or take, is how long they've been rising. Our oven is set to 375. It's preheated. We're going to go ahead and throw the white rolls in the oven. And they're going to cook for about anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes. 12 is probably the good range, and we're going to keep an eye on them. You just want them nice and golden brown. So set your timer for 10 to 12 minutes. And while those are rising in the oven and cooking, we're going to make kolaches out of these. Okay, it's been 13 minutes, and I think we're done. Those are your white rolls, and they will keep and warm up for a whole week.